like to welcome you here to the Wichita-Sedgwick County Historical Museum. We have a special program tonight that we're very lucky to have. I'll probably dispense with a public address system if everyone's okay with an acoustic volume of speaking. Can everyone hear me all right? All right, then I think you'll probably be able to hear Lynn as well. I have to thank a few people, as always, before we get started, and that is the City of Wichita and the Sedgwick County Board of Commissioners for their support of this museum. The city supports us in one way by letting us use this building the last 40 years, the original Wichita City Hall, and that's where we are. But it's been a museum now since about 1980, and I hope you'll have time this evening. We're open until 8 for you to go around and look at the exhibits, especially the Cecil McAlister exhibit, the art exhibit that we do every year, thanks to the Lois K. Walls Foundation, who has supported an annual art exhibit of local historic art. And so the Cecil McAlister exhibits come to us through pieces from our museum's collection and also through loans of the Campbell family and the Weber family here locally, who have strong connections to Cecil McAlister. Also need to thank our membership. We are supported by old-fashioned card-carrying museum association members, and I see several of you in the audience this evening, so thank you for that support. And also the support of our friends organization, the WIMS, who have our gift shop open this evening, and refreshments down there on the first floor. As you exit, you might want to stop in and see them. And I have to thank especially for putting this together, especially for presentation here at the museum, Lynn Behnke, who is really her forte is being a master gardener and giving presentations in that regard, but she has branched out because of her special knowledge and interest in Cecil McAlister and put together such a wonderful presentation. We saw it a few months ago at our Senior Wednesday program, and we asked her if she wouldn't mind coming back and doing it again, and we are videotaping it to go onto our YouTube channel, Wichita History on YouTube. And we have a lot of our finer presentations recorded there so that people can enjoy them if they can't come to it. I'll turn it over to you, Lynn. Thank you very much. Let's give Lynn a round.
Thank you. I am not an art historian, and I'm not an expert on Cecil, but when Eric approached my family about letting some of their paintings be displayed, I said, can I do a program? Because he was our neighbor when I was a little girl. And as a teacher, I know the best way to learn is to teach. So I had a lot of fun putting this together. Now, the museum staff did a lot of the research, so I have to give them credit. Lots of newspaper articles and things from the city directory that were really helpful. And this photo is from the Heritage magazine. That is the newsletter that this museum puts out, and I'll quote from that from time to time. And for those of you who are PowerPoint purists, I have to apologize. I know you're not supposed to put very many words on the screen, but as my hearing fades, I find myself looking for the closed captioning on the pulpit, on the, every place. And so just in case anybody's in that situation, you may be able to read some of this if you miss it when I say it. So let's go ahead. So let's start with the family history. In these records, the family name sometimes appears spelled McAlister with 2 L's, sometimes with 1 L, and sometimes with an E. And when I have the historic documents, I've just left them the way that they had them. The 1 L is the way he signed his paintings. And they were a close family, these generations of McAlisters. They worked together and they often lived together. In the early days of Wichita, there were so many occupations needed that these guys turned their hands to many different things. And as you will see, paint was in their blood. So we'll start with Cecil's grandfather, Harvey. Harvey McAlister, his wife Lavinia, and their son Charles, and maybe a daughter, arrived in Wichita in 1875. Wichita had just been incorporated as a third-class city in July of 1870, so the city's only really 5 years old officially. And the early Wichitans had many occupations. Harvey was first listed in 1878 in the Wichita City Directory Farmer's Feed Stable and being from Williamsport, Indiana. The 1880 census listing shows him as a coal dealer living with Lavinia, his son Charles, and there was a daughter, Cora. Subsequent listings show Harvey as a produce dealer, working at McAlister and Son, at Wichita Produce Company, at Dickey and McAlister, at Cigar and Tobacco, a stock dealer, and then in 1902, painter. Paint and wallpaper, house painter, and then no further occupation is listed until his death in 1926. Harvey and Lavinia are buried at Maple Grove Cemetery. Then Cecil's father, Charles, his name was Charles Samuel McAlister, and he was born in 1869. He apparently had a head for numbers because he was a clerk at a barber shop already at the age of 16. Next, with his father, Harvey, he worked at Commission Merchants, McAlister and Son. Then he was a bookkeeper at Wichita Produce, the same time his father was there. At 20, he married Daisy Dickey. And I can only assume that he was taken into the family business because it became Dickey and McAlister, and Father Harvey worked there too. 1900, Charles and Daisy and Charles Cecil, who's our hero, and Samuel Clarence and Alice lived next door to Grandpa Harvey. Charles is listed as a painter. By 1905, Cora May and Edna Louise had joined the family, and by 1920, Farrah Margaret. So if you're keeping track, that's 6 kids. In 1925, Charles is described as a paper hanger. In 1930, a painter and paper hanger. In 1940, and this was after Cecil got his award, an interior decorator. And it also said that he had completed 2 years of college. He worked 22 weeks in 1940, and his income was $300. The median income for a man in 1940 was $956. So because he's only shown as working half of the year, maybe he was doing something else the other half of the year, but that's really low wages. He died in 1956. Daisy had died 2 years earlier, and only Cecil, Clarence, and Farrah Margaret survived him. And he's buried in Wichita Park Cemetery. Now we get to Cecil. Charles Cecil McAlister, born in Wichita August 3rd, 1890. Just to set the stage here, Benjamin Harrison is president. The Wright brothers are still working in a print shop. They haven't started with bicycles, much less airplanes. The Battle of Wounded Knee, which is the last big fight between federal troops and Native Americans, occurs in South Dakota. Preparation for the U.S. Census begins using an automated tabulating machine with punch cards invented by Herman Hollerith, and that company goes on to become IBM. And the 1890 census shows that the population has grown more than 25% in the last 10 years. There are 62 million people living in the U.S. Cecil attended Washington School, and an article appears in the paper about a surprise party given for his teacher. Wouldn't Wouldn't you love for our articles in our paper to consist of things like this? The other teachers gave it for her. The sixth graders presented her with a bouquet of flowers, and those in attendance are listed. Cecil's name is there in red. From ages 15 to 18, he was listed in the city directory as a student. In 1910, at age 20, it says his occupation was decorator in the industry house, and that continued until 1914. In March of 1914, his art was recognized in the Wichita Daily Eagle. There were, just like the Lady Bird Johnson times, people were offended by ugly billboards. And so the billboard company decided that they would enhance their reputation and the appearance of Wichita by having fine art paintings reproduced on these billboards. So they had Mona Lisa painted, they had a mill scene that was a copy of a picture that J. Morgan owned, and then a picture of Daniel in the lion's den. These were painted by Cecil in 5 days. They also said that to improve the appearance, they would plant pretty grass around the bases of the billboards. But we're all familiar with the Mona Lisa. I could not identify which mill scene, because there are a whole bunch of them in the Pierpont collection. But this is Daniel in the Lion's Den by Riviere. And these three are painted in 5 days by McAlister. Just amazing. A little later that year, Cecil got into some trouble with the law. At the conclusion of the trial of Charles McAlister, a painter, in police court last evening, Judge Souders fined him $10. When Patrolman William Pullen requested Mr. McAlister to take his horse home and feed it Wednesday night, trouble followed between the two. Witnesses testified that the painter struck the officer with a whip and swung an iron weight at him. Mr. McAlister asserted he did so because he believed he had a right to oppose the officer's action in removing his horse from the street. In 1915, Cecil was listed as a laborer for the Western Sign Works Company. He designed a flour milling exhibit for the 1915 wheat show that was held at the Forum. If anybody's new to Wichita, the Forum was our big civic center before we got Century 2. The Wichita Daily Eagle noted that the painting for this exhibit was done by someone else, by Mr. Jenkins. However, in 1916, Cecil's designation at the company was changed from laborer to painter. So apparently his talents had been recognized. According to the Wichita Daily Eagle, once again, Cecil was in trouble, this time with his brother Clarence. Clarence and Cecil McAlister were fined $10 for speeding and interfering with an officer. They threatened to assault motorcycleman Bacchus and would not go to the station at his command. He called the patrol wagon and another officer. Then they came very readily. They said they would appeal. At that time, Cecil left town. He went to study art in Chicago. The 1919 city directory shows him back in Wichita at the Wichita Sign Company. The Beacon locates it at 200 West Douglas over Morris Hardware. And one of the lines says, Mr. McAlister has done pictures and decorative work in the city for years, and last summer attended an art school. The business relocated to 123 West 1st, and says, C.C. McAlister, manager of the concern, is a picture painter of merit and has a wide reputation throughout this section of the Southwest. Here's the logo for the company. And you'll notice the slogan there in the middle says, every man a painter. If this was my sign company, it would say something like, only I can paint, hire me. So it's very egalitarian. In 1919, Cecil married. Announcement has been made of the marriage of Charles Cecil McAlister of the city to Maud Gertrude Moonshower of Marion, Indiana, which took place Wednesday, December 31st. Mr. McAlister is a well-known commercial artist who's now completing a special art course in Chicago. At the close of this course, Mr. McAlister will bring his bride to his home here. This is a picture of Maud, and this is on display upstairs in the exhibit. In 1920, according to Heritage, aspiring to the life of a fine art painter, McAlister attempted to leave sign painting and focus on landscapes, portraits, and still lives at his newly opened modern studio. He continued to supplement his income with display and residential decorating work. So I thought this would be a good time to show you some pictures of some paintings that are in private collections. The owners of this painting have always been intrigued by this pretty lady because of her hands. Her hands looked strange to them, and they didn't know if Cecil didn't know how to paint hands or if the lady had some kind of a deformity. So we eagerly looked through all the rest of the paintings and looked at all of the hands. This one looked very Eastern European to us. As a shocker, I like this one. As you go through these, it's kind of, you see a whole bunch of styles, kind of like he was doing one of everything. This has the Impressionist look. This one has a clarity that a lot of his don't have. This Southwest, there was a lot of Southwestern influence in his art. And as you heard in that one newspaper clip, we were considered part of the Southwest at various times in our history. Southwestern landscape. This obligatory men in a boat, ballerina, more ballerina. This Asian musician, see the hands look normal to me. Matador. Oh, I was supposed to warn you when the nudes came up, sorry. There's a series of nudes. But look at the hands. No hands in that one. And this is a mural. He also, besides framed paintings, did murals. And this is in a home in Crown Heights in East Wichita. Something that I read said that in College Hill that there are a lot of his paintings on walls. This is not in a private collection. This is actually in the museum's collection, and this is interesting. We think this is a sample that he did of a mural with different wainscoting and different trim options for a homeowner or somebody to look at and approve, decide which way they wanted to go. Imagine just churning these out. Somebody found these in an antique store and bought them and put them on eBay. And that's how we found them, and now they're in our collection. And then this one just came to me yesterday. It had been seen in a gallery in Colorado. And this is a painter. You can see the paints on the table behind him, and he's holding a paintbrush. And this is a buy war bonds kind of theme, war savings stamps. And this looks like a painting that has to be telling some interesting story. See the man who's turned away. Is he on the other side in the war? Or is he too poor to contribute and feels guilty? I think this is intriguing. I'd like to know more about this story. And then I found this little boy in a site that was called Ask Art, I think. and it was listed as an example of McAlister's work. And I just love it. I just think his face is so appealing. I would like to meet this child. And it's so different from anything else I'd seen that I really wanted to look at the signature up close. This was listed for $2,500 when I first found it on eBay, when I first started doing this research. And the price has dropped enough that our museum has just acquired it. So this will become part of our collection. Oops, there's a price. And there's his signature in the corner. So. Oops. That was the logo for the Modern Studio, and this says the Modern Studio was established in 1920 at 218 West 2nd. In the short time of its existence, it has placed contracts with many of the leading retail houses for display window backgrounds, including the Boston Store, Rohrbach Dry Goods Company, and Greenfield Brothers. The backgrounds are cleverly designed. One undergoing completion now is of the medieval period, bringing out clearly the famous old Rome Colosseum. C.C. McAlister is the owner and manager, and then it lists the employees, W.C. Miller and then S.C. McAlister, who's his little brother. I had no idea what they were talking about. I was picturing painting on window glass. And then these clippings appeared from the Salina Daily Union. It said, Resca Studios opened a studio in Wichita at 218 West 2nd, occupying both floors. Well, that's the same address. C.C. McAlister, formerly with Modern Art Studio at Chicago and a well-known artist, has become affiliated with the firm. Resca Studio started in Salina, and that location will be used for storage and manufacturing of display fixtures, artificial foliage, and decorations. I'm still not getting this. These tiny little paragraphs say, they've also been successful in affiliating with them Mr. C.C. McAlister, a well-known artist and one who thoroughly understands window background art and who's a competent scenic artist. He's formerly been connected with the Modern Art Studio of Chicago, a firm that manufactures window backgrounds exclusively. And their business now is known in practically every town in the state, and their products have entered almost every good town in the state. I love the way they wrote this. It might also be added that it's the only and most complete service of its kind west of Chicago, there being like firms, however, on the West Coast. The merchants with whom this firm has become acquainted are thankful for such a complete service in their own state and have proven their appreciation by liberal patronage. They've further been assured a liberal patronage of the merchants in their new field. So I looked up Modern Art Studio and finally realized this is display windows in stores. I just almost missed downtown department stores. It was a big thing in my mom's generation, but display windows just weren't a big thing by the time I went downtown. But you see it in old movies like Macy's and stuff. Well, that's what this is all about. These gorgeous displays in the store windows downtown. So that's what Modern Art Studios did, and that's what Resca Studios did, and that's what Mr. McAlister was into. He did the painting for these things. This one, this Japanese one, costs $35. This one costs $30, and it's described as being 12 foot long, 7.5 feet high, made of wallboard and lumber, and the scenery is painted on muslin. So this is why they're needing to store artificial foliage and all these props and everything. Now this is a real one, and this is from a book of these windows. So this is a lady and her children in the park. You can see the opportunity for painting here because this is like an art gallery, and all of these things are painted in the background. This one, it's hard to know how much is construction, how much is trompe l'oeil painting to get that perspective. But this is children's clothing. And this one is simply a display window of ribbon. And big deal, these window displays. 10 years after he opened, he had to close the Modern Studio in Wichita because of the Great Depression. And Cecil was forced to return to sign painting and commercial art to support his family. In 1929, his studio was shown at being at 3558 South Lawrence. At that time, he was listed in Who's Who in Wichita, said he was with special service in the World War, that he was a Christian, that he was a Mason, and that his hobby was farming. Then in 1935, he's listed in the city directory as a commercial artist at 3558 South Broadway. Now, anybody who knows this part of town will not be surprised that the address is Lawrence at one point and Broadway at another point. Broadway, which is Highway 81, was a busy road, but there was a train track that came almost parallel until it crossed it, which meant drivers did not see the train coming. They called it a dead man's crossing because of so many accidents. And that's when the city decided they had to build a viaduct, a bridge over the railroad crossing. And that was completed in 1937, but the street names became really confused with all of that construction. And those businesses that fronted on Broadway now fronted on an overpass. And that's significant to the story as it goes along. There are interesting notes in the 1940 census. It shows Mr. McAlister's residence on South Hydraulic Road, his occupation artist in the industry of picture and mural. It says he didn't attend school or college, and the highest grade he completed was elementary school, 8th grade. But since we know he was in school from the age of 15 to 18, he either got more education or spent an awfully long time in the 8th grade. At that same time, it shows that he worked 48 weeks prior to the census and 52 weeks in 39, reported an income of 0, and answered yes to other income sources. Maybe this is when he was doing his farming. I don't know. At some point, prior to 1946, the McAlisters moved their residence to the same place his studio was at 3558 South Broadway. And this is how our family started crossing over. My grandparents and their kids truck farmed at a little house on South Santa Fe and needed more room, so they rented the land right next door to Mr. McAlister at 3560 South Broadway. And the kids would walk along that train track after school to come and hoe and harvest and stuff. And eventually they were able to buy the land and the farmhouse that went with it, and the Campbell family moved in there, and that's when they started neighboring with the McAlisters. As they could, the Campbells started building glass houses over their truck farm patches, and that grew into R.W. Campbell and Sons greenhouse, and eventually the Plant Kingdoms. And there's a Plant Kingdom at that location now. People wanted to buy Grandpa's tomato plants as well as his tomatoes, so they had to go greenhouse. Now, the businesses and homes were approached from an access road, but their mailboxes were still up on Broadway. And so, as my dad would walk home from school, he would stop and pick up the mail for his family and Mr. McAlister to save the McAlisters about now a 2-block walk out to their mailbox. And it was so exciting. This was when candy bars were a nickel. But Mr. McAlister always gave Dad a Mars bar, and they cost a dime. So Dad was thrilled and happy to do this little errand. He also got a chance to go into the studio, and he talks about how in the studio there were long, deep, rectangular pits in the floor with a series of ropes and pulleys. And that's how Mr. McAlister could paint these enormous canvases, because it gave him a chance to raise or lower it as needed to get to the different parts. And that's what that says. So Grandma and Grandpa are living in the big house. Their kids have grown and gone. And Grandma and Mrs. McAlister neighbor with sharing recipes and cups of sugar and that kind of thing. And the little house next door to the big house was a garage, and Dad converted it to a house for Mom and me when I was born. And they're still using this unnamed access road to get there. And Mom said, no, I'm not going to live on a no-name road. It's 1 block east of Broadway. We're going to call it Topeka and put our mailbox there. And so that's what happened. And that's why that little section of road is named Topeka to this day. The McAlisters were always friendly neighbors. Mom says that they always brought them chocolates at Christmas. And then Mr. McAlister always seemed relaxed, and she never saw him without a smile. Mrs. McAlister was more reclusive, but he was out in the neighborhood quite a bit. When I was just real little, but I could tell we were getting close to home when I saw the giant Thunderbird on the big door of Mr. McAlister's studio. It said murals, and it was painted in these dusty roses and desert pinks. And I'm describing all of this to Mom and Dad to validate my memories, to verify my facts. And my dad said, Lynn, it was red and it faded. So I may over-dramatize, but as a child, it was a big pink thing, and it meant that I was close to home. You could see it from the overpass. Mrs. McAlister's health began to fail. They had never had any children. They didn't have any family nearby. There wasn't residential care the way it is now. Mr. McAlister was still working, and eventually he found a place for her in Larned, the only place that he could take her. And it impressed my mother, his faithfulness every Saturday for the rest of her life. He visited her there. Mom and Dad had always said, I grew up, knowing McAlister and his work and the flag and everything, but they said that there were 2 big paintings in the Forum that he had done, and they were on either side of the stage. And when the Forum closed, I remember them speculating about, what do you think the city did with those paintings? Rolled them up? You suppose they're stored someplace? We can't verify that those paintings in the Forum were done by McAlister. Another artist is credited with the 2 big paintings beside the stage. So that may have just been an error. But there was a Wichita DeCourcy Cream Company, the first dairy in Wichita to carry fluid milk, located across from East High. And they had a dairy store there, and Mom and Dad shopped there, and they said that there were pastoral scenes painted there by McAlister. And lots of nice rolling grass and little bitty cows. And so that was a place that they had seen them. And if anybody wonders what you carry besides fluid milk at a grocery store, it's butter, cheese, and frozen dairy products. I had to look that up. I was intrigued. We moved away when I was 7, and Cecil died January 6, 1969, at the age of 78. He's buried in Wichita Park Cemetery and survived by both his brother and sister, Samuel and Farah. Samuel, or Clarence, was also a painter in the house painting tradition. And we got to talk to some of Samuel's descendants, and they said that the 2 would have good-natured debates over which paid better, the fine art painting, the house painting. One, did you get paid at the end? One, did you have to have a commission for? So it was good-natured wrangling over which was more profitable. Now, McAlister Studio was still standing until about 2012. It had been many other businesses over the years. And the city of Wichita decided that blasted viaduct was one of the most dangerous bridges in Wichita and had to be replaced. By this time, my husband and I had bought the old family farmhouse, and our daughter was the 5th generation of our family to live there. And they were going to tear it down. So I went to a lot of city meetings and protested and said it was historic and it had a certified wildlife habitat and everything I could think of. And eventually they sent an architectural historian and determined, yes, it was historic. It was built for the daughter of Buffalo Bill Mathewson and it had to be saved. As I'd go to these meetings, my brother, who now runs the greenhouse business, came with me and said, and in addition to our family home, the designer of that flag that's right there with you on the podium lived and worked in a building that you're going to tear down too. They saved our house, but we couldn't get any traction on the studio. So it was destroyed. We have a city council candidate who is an advocate for the South End, wants people to know that something good can come out of the South End, like Mr. McAlister, and is working to have that viaduct renamed for him, or named for him. I don't think it has a name at this point. Now, you can't tell the story of Cecil McAlister without talking about the Wichita flag. In fact, he usually is only mentioned as a footnote in Wichita flag stories. In 1937, Wichita city leaders decided that Wichita had an identity crisis. Just 8 years prior, it had been named the Air Capital City, but I guess that didn't fly. Thank you. To create excitement, the leaders wanted a new image for Wichita, so they decided to have a contest, and the winner would earn fame and $40. So Burt Wells, the city manager, asked the American Legion to develop a contest, and the Wichita Rotary Club supplied 6 prizes that totaled $85, but that would be $1,400 today. There were over 100 entries, and Cecil took first prize. This is a clipping from 1962. It says, "See, Cecil McAlister dropped in at the city building the other day to mark the 25th year the Wichita City flag has been in use." And I got it to pop him up just a little bit. He looks like a jolly version of the man in American Gothic. Until recently, most articles about the Wichita flag have stated that many still don't know we have a flag. Mom and Dad have clipped articles about the flag forever and found one in 1997 on Flag Day that was titled, "When It Waves, Few Wave Back." It was not flown over Wichita State until 2015. But the design was praised. A recent internet contest, people who study flags gave it high marks. There were 150 entered, and it came in 6th in the North American Vexillological Association contest. And it was the #1 pick of the association president. Now, in 2017, the tone of the articles about the flag has changed. And I have some quotes from the paper. Oops. The Wichita flag has become the symbol for growing pride in the city, said Johnny Freedom, a longtime Wichitan known for his painted Wichita flag products. In addition to bringing our city together, Freedom added that our flag is just plain cool. We have the coolest flag on the planet. Let's be honest, it is cool. It is so cool that it has its own Instagram page. It is so cool people have shared pictures of the flag all over the world. And the USS Wichita, a Freedom-class combat ship, has incorporated the flag into its crest. February 27th, the Wichita Eagle says, the Wichita flag resurges as a symbol of pride. And they speculated, today McAlister would be pleased to know that his flag has experienced resurgence and become a symbol of Wichita pride. Not long ago, finding a flag proved to be a challenging scavenger hunt, but today it's a common image woven into the city's landscape, from murals, t-shirts, bumper stickers, pint glasses at breweries, and plenty of flag swag on local store shelves. McAlister would also appreciate that much of the flag's resurgence can be credited to local artists like himself. The Workroom, an interior design and home decor store, has one of the largest selection of flag gifts in the city. Owner Janelle King has enjoyed the flag's resurgence firsthand. She loves that the flag is more than a cool symbol found on shirts and mugs. She's noticed a shift in perception of Wichita. We jokingly use the hashtag, "There's nothing to do here," because it's an adage we've all heard so many times. But anymore, it's simply not the truth. And the emerging pride has embraced the banner as their symbol to showcase this. Helping to change the perception of Wichita, which is what was intended by the contest in 1937, has finally taken place. It just took 80 years. So we don't have a lot of quotes from Mr. McAlister. I don't think he was a very loquacious kind of an individual. But I would like to close with his own words, the way he described his flag as he sent it as an entry to the contest. The white circle around a field of blue in the center and containing the Indian design for the sun symbolizes a hogan, or permanent home. Superimposed on the field of blue is the white sun. The blue indicates happiness and faithfulness in a town of happy people and permanent homes. Radiating from the circular field of blue and red, are red and white stripes. The red means virtue and honor. The white stands for courageous virtues. The stripes lining the red and white background are symbols of rays of light and ways to come and go, open and free to all, hence the red, white, and blue. And that's it.